Here in Seoul, demonstrations against the Iraq War take on the air of an open-air concert. But the carnival atmosphere belies the deeper human feeling. With every additional day of war, the pressure on the streets is mounting. South Koreans are afraid that the assault on Saddam is laying the foundation for a second Korean War. The feeling is that Washington decides the politics of nations like Iraq and North Korea. Through the threatening deployment of troops in neighbouring countries on the one hand, and on the other their aggressive realpolitik. And Seoul says nothing. It's unequivocally on the side of the Western allies.
저희가 지금 한국 민족들이 촛불을 드는 이유는 한국이 하나이다라는 걸 먼저 보여줘야 하고요.
I'm protesting against the Iraq war, and also against the fact that our government has sent 700 troops to Iraq. That's basically saying we actively support the Americans' war of occupation. And now there is naturally the fear with us that the USA could also bombard North Korea. We find it outrageous how the US soldiers conduct themselves here. In the last year, GIs killed 2 girls with a tank and walked away scot-free. The US military seems immune to such popular opinion. They are still performing manoeuvres with the South Korean army within touching distance of the North Korean border. The regime in Pyongyang sees such war games as a precursor to a full-scale invasion. The fear is hardly unfounded. Tactical planning games are clearly being played out in the Pentagon. The New York Times has reported surgical precision cruise missile airstrikes and the deployment of tactical nuclear weapons, all in the event diplomacy should finally fail.
This is the tensest I've seen it for the reason that there's a real possibility that there may be some conflict with the North. This is primarily because of the United States. The current regime in the United States apparently is not reticent about taking on North Korea. This is something that in the past had been more or less an agreed thing. We would go so far but would not lead to war. But with the current administration in the United States, South Koreans are very worried that war could be declared even by the United States or some limited bombing or something taking place, which of course would bring North and South Korea into a war.
A ride along the 38th parallel, the last Iron Curtain. Behind this fence, beyond the demilitarized no man's land, lurks the despised, as President Bush stated, nuclear power North Korea. 4 kilometers of mines make the border completely unassailable. For decades, the complete separation and alienation created by this mess of barbed wire have been far more pointed than the divide across the Berlin Wall ever was. Refusal and suspicions have festered around this border, about a people, so they say here, so dedicated to their leader that they are prepared to follow him to their own death. Historically, diplomatic discussions between Seoul and Pyongyang have taken place here at Panmunjom. Eye to eye, South has faced North amid the highest levels of alertness and suspicion. Tension palpably hangs in the air here, perhaps the inevitable result of the cat-and-mouse games played out almost daily here. It all happened in earnest in these plain barracks, where the only regular contact between North and South took place under UN observation. For the time being, Pyongyang has called an end to such meetings. For Western observers, it would appear Kim Jong-il's regime couldn't care less about peace, having thrown all rationale out of the window.
I don't say North Koreans are irrational. They are very rational. They're very rational. What they want is sustaining the political power and then get more economic aid from South Korea and other countries. Even though the US attacked some area in North Korea by missile, but they cannot start the total war against South Korea. because the beginning of a war means the collapse of their system. They know that.
In the meantime, possible war scenarios are still constantly played out in high-stake games of risk. Washington has sent the strongest armed force for 10 years to Korea, on aircraft carriers like the Carl Vinson. In March alone, the Americans flew 220 espionage deployments over the Korean peninsula. Before any preemptive strike takes place against Pyongyang, however, Washington would first need to seek agreement from Seoul. The South Koreans would be loath to give it. In the event of a US attack, Seoul would be the immediate target of Pyongyang. South Korea does not want to leave crisis talks to the Americans. We don't want the dialogue with North Korea to be led solely by the USA, but also to involve China, Russia and Japan, regional powers in the Far East. That would be fairer for North Korea. After all, if any advancements in the discussions are to be accompanied by economic aid. Furthermore, the political system in Pyongyang should be recognized by the neighboring countries to save face for Kim Jong-il. Nobody should try to bring down the regime.
북한이 대화하는 것을 우리는 옳은 방향으로 생각을 합니다.
It isn't just the wheels of war that are rolling towards the north. In a few years' time, the train connection between South and North Korea is to be restored, as it last was 5 decades ago. Today, the train only goes a few kilometers towards Pyongyang. For these passengers, it is a journey into the past. Families take Sunday trips to gain a glimpse into their old homeland. For 6 years, the regime in Pyongyang has permitted family reunifications on North Korean territory. A perfect photo opportunity for the world's media. Just over a month ago, the family of Ha Sang-nam took the opportunity to see their separated brother in the north. In 1950, in the early fog of war, the family lost sight of each other and for 50 years heard nothing of the whereabouts of their brother. With the help of the Red Cross, they were finally reunited. Meeting again wasn't easy. For 3 days we saw each other, but only for an hour per day. It was only possible to have the most superficial discussions with my brother. We discussed a few family things, but nothing political. I don't even know what he does for a living. These topics were forbidden. The Secret Service were constantly present. A new station is being built here to service trains to both Korean capitals. But at present, such communication is still an illusion, nothing more. Nothing crosses the border from North Korea. No cars, no letters. For the families whose relatives live in the north, all they have to make do with it is a view of a piece of border of an inhospitable no man's land. Still, the faint hope of future reunification never leaves the heads of the old Koreans.
I think within this generation it's very hard to see reunification of family members on a large basis like this. As I say, even a unification would mean a phased thing. It wouldn't be like East and West Germany. It couldn't be. It would totally bankrupt the South. It would have to be some sort of phased arrangement. So within this generation it would be very difficult.
The threat of military action still looms large. But after the war in Iraq is over, an immediate war on the Korean peninsula seems unlikely. North Korea still enjoys close ties to Beijing. To ignore such macro politics could have fatal consequences for world peace. The Korea crisis is an exercise in controlled escalation. Will diplomacy and negotiation have success here where they failed in Iraq? We could all find out the answer very soon.